Hi, my name is Ronnie Kaye, and I'm in Oklahoma City, and I'm a disc jockey, but I've also been on television and radio, and my career has been a blast for me. I have never honestly worked a day in my life. I am now 74 years old. I came from a little town in southeast Missouri called Cooter, Missouri. I was voted most likely in my high school class to succeed. Although my dad was a farmer, I said, hey, I heard these guys in Memphis, guys like Wink Martindale and George Klein, and there was guys in Memphis like Elvis Presley, and I said, I want to do that. I like that. I said, girls scream, and guys want to do it, and it's easy, and there's no heavy lifting. So here I come to Oklahoma City via Lawton, Oklahoma, and I worked there 6 months, and I hear over a PA system, listening from one control booth to the other, a program director in Lawton at KSWO talking to a guy by the name of Danny Williams. And he's saying to Danny, he said, Danny, I'm program director in Lawton, it's a good job, and I don't think I want to come to WKY to work an all-night show. And I said to the guy, I said, you don't want to work the show? I want to work the show. He said, well, send Danny Williams a tape. I sent Danny a tape. And I called him, followed up on the tape, and Danny said, you're not ready for prime time. And I said, yes, I am ready for prime time. So I sent him a second tape, and it was even worse than the first, but I'd irritated him so much by that time that he said, okay, come on down and talk to me. So he was going to fly down to Lawton in an airplane. He was doing it. He was, a flying guy at the time, and he was always in a fad thing. So he was flying in airplanes at the time. So it happened on that Sunday morning. He was going to fly down and talk to me. That we were fogged in. So I got on the phone. I said, "Hey, are you coming down?" He said, "I can't. We're fogged in." I said, "No problem. I'll be there in 2 hours." So he said, "I live on a street called Villa." And so I came to the big city. First time I'd ever been in a big city. I was, as I say, a small town guy from a little town of 500 people, And so I got here and I looked on Villa. The only problem was I was on South Villa and he lived on North Villa. So about 3 hours later, I show up at his doorstep and he says, "Where have you been? You're late." And I said, "Well, I couldn't find you." So anyway, he directs his family to get in the back of the room in the house. Says, "Everybody leave the room, I gotta talk to this kid." He's already intimidating me to death by just, the guy himself. So we sit down and he says to me, he says, "How much money do you need to come to work here?" And I'd already been told, we'd discussed it before I left. I said, "Shoot high, I said, "I need $140 a week." He said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "My top man, Chuck Dunaway from ABC in New York, who just came back, is not making that kind of money." Yeah, I said, "Well, what do you offer me?" He said, "90. I said, "I'll take it." He said, "Well, let me talk to Lee Allen Smith." And he got on the phone and he called Lee Allen on the other end. And he said, "Lee Allen, I got this kid." I happened to hear it through the walls. He said, "I got this kid who," he said, "he really wants to come to work bad here at WKY Radio." And Lee Allen said, hey, Danny said, "He's inexperienced. He's not very good. He's not very talented." And Lee Allen said to Danny, said, "How much does he want a week?" And Danny said, $90 a week. And he said, "Snap him up." So that's the beginning of my career in Oklahoma City at WKY Radio and television. And suddenly, from a small town in Cooter, Missouri, population 500, I am rubbing elbows with some of the top talent in the nation. People like Tom Paxton, people like Danny Williams, people like Maury Ferguson, people like Jack Ogle, people like Bob Berry. I mean, you name it. These are top flight people. And so I walked down the hall and some client says to me, he said, "I want to use your voice on a commercial." And they said, "What will you charge?" And I said, "Are you kidding? You want to use me?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "I won't charge you nothing. I'll be delighted to." And Tom Paxton says, "Come over here, I need to talk to you." And Tom calls me off in the corner and says, "Ronnie," he says, "the only thing we've got to sell is ourselves." I said, "If you give that away, you got nothing." I said, "Thank you, Tom." And I didn't give it away anymore. I started selling myself. I was in radio, worked the all-night show, midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning, followed by Danny Williams. We used to argue church and Bible for the first hour of his show every morning. And in the first few weeks I was on the station, which was a very powerful station, WKY owned the market. It owned the state, it owned the county, it owned the people. They loved it. And I went over to Shawnee, Oklahoma for a public appearance when I was on the all-night show. And I walked into a drive-through type place, a little burger joint after I'd finished the gig. And I said, I'd like to have a hamburger and a Coke. The guy says to me, he says, I recognize your voice. And I said, you do? I said, who am I? He said, you're Ronnie Kaye. I said, yeah. I said, this is a gig, man. I've been here 2 months and already people know my voice just out here everywhere I go. And the kid said, I just wanted to say something to you. And I said, what's that? He said, you are the worst disc jockey I have ever heard. That was my initiation. Next morning, I'm all gloom and, I'm doom and I'm down and I'm not happy. And Danny says, what's wrong with you? He said, you're always so happy. And said, now look at you, you're down. I said, well, Danny, I said, a guy tells me over there in Shawnee last night that I'm the worst disc jockey he's ever heard. And Danny gave me some great advice. He said, Ronnie, he said, if you're gonna believe everything that you hear that people say to you in this business, he said, you better get out of it right now. He said, because you're not gonna be able to take it. And so I learned from that, and I lived with that, and I worked with that, and I continued through my career. And in 1966, after doing pretty good, moving from all night to 9 to midnight to 9 to noon, and doing a feature called Hello, Oklahoma, where I called all these people like Dolisi on New Year's Eve and would say, hey, this is Buck Fuzzard, and we are having a big Christmas party. And I was calling Dolisi, and I would say, we need this big mixer. And these are the kind of premises that I would give people. And this show got very well known on radio, and people were talking everywhere about Hello, Oklahoma, which was the name of the feature. And it endeared me to a lot of people. And they moved me up 3 to 6, which was prime time, drive time afternoon. And at that time, it was about 1965. And from 65 to 66, I worked that shift. And in 1966, I just, out of the clear blue, said, you know what? I think I want to do television. And I went to Danny, and I said, Danny, I want to do television, and I'd like to do a dance show. And here's the coincidence. He said, last week, Dr. Pepper came to the station and said, they want to do a dance show. So, and I'm reading this magazine, and I'm looking at one of the teen magazines, and I say, and there's a feature in there that says, making the scene. And it's got all these famous movie stars that are making the scene in this magazine. So I told Danny, I said, look, I would like to be on TV. And he said, you know what, a coincidence. He said, just last week, he said, Dr. Pepper came to us and said, we want to do a show similar to what you're talking about. And so it all snapped together, just happenstance, good luck, God's blessings, whatever you call it. And we were in a meeting within a week, talking to the powers that be at Dr. Pepper, and Joe Jerkins and TV, and Danny and radio, and all the folks. And I had seen this great article in a TV teen magazine that said, and one of the features was making the scene. It always featured the stars and people that were, on the scene. And so I said, that is a great name for a TV show. So I went into this meeting and I said, I got the name for the show. And they said, what is it? And they said, making the scene. And they said, why don't we just shorten it to The Scene? I said, that sounds good too. So that's what happened. We went to The Scene, it was a show called The Scene, and at the time, being brand new, I needed a little bit of help to get it going. So I turned around and I asked my wife, Deanna, to help me with the recruitment and the, kind of helping me along with it. So I had her on a couple of weeks, and without mentioning it to anybody. She just showed up, she was just there. And I went to Joe Jerkins and I said, what do you think? Is it okay that Deanna's on The Scene and on the show with me? He said, no. He said, I don't want her on the show. I said, why not? He said, one amateur is enough. So I realized at that point that I really hadn't endeared myself to Joe Jerkins, but I was trying real hard. So what we did is we told the kids how to dress, how to dance, how to act, how to move, when to smile, when not to smile, all this stuff. And this is something that no dance show had ever done before. It had been tried, I believe, twice. Channel 5 had tried it once, and maybe twice or a couple of times. I'd heard that it had been tried. But the idea was on those shows was just, hey, if you want to come be on the show next week, come on out. And that was it. That was all the recruitment there was. Come on out and be here. You don't know what you're going to get when you do that. So we really got and worked with our kids a lot. Spent a lot of time on the phone with them, showed them how to dress. We ended up sending 2 couples to American Bandstand. They both, actually three couples, and they placed in this order: first year on American Bandstand, number 1, second year number 2, third year number 3. So they won automobiles, and little did I know at the time that Dick Clark was being paid by the Dr. Pepper Company for his commercials in stocks. So Dr. Pepper had actually made Dick Clark a major stockholder in the Dr. Pepper Company. So when it came time for the state fair, the Dr. Pepper Company came to me and said, "Would you like to have Dick Clark come down and be with you on the show?" I said, "You kidding me? Bring him on." So I spend the whole day riding around in my little Jaguar with Dick Clark, and I take him out to the house, and we have orange juice, and we go down to the fair. And I said to Dick, I said, Dick, I'd really like to come out to LA. I've always had an ambition to work out there in radio and television. He said, "How much are you making right now here in Oklahoma City?" And I told him, I said, $30,000 a year. This was in 1966. So Dick Clark comes to Oklahoma City. I interview him for the show. I take him out to the fair. The kids are just going gaga over Dick Clark, and he's wearing a suit and a tie. And I've gone over to a place called David's Menswear, and I've gotten myself this latest trendy deal called a cotton jeans outfit. And Dick Clark is on stage saying Ronnie came in his pajamas and "Hi, everybody," and the kids are booing Dick Clark. How about that, gang? Booing Dick Clark because they like my pajama outfit. And anyway, so I never did really dress very well. I had a lot of, deficiencies in that area. As a matter of fact, I had the C.R. Anthony Company later picked the show up, and they took me down to Bud Galloway's office at the C.R. Anthony Company to sell the show, and we needed to talk to them. And of all days, I wear this outfit that's got tons of holes all in it. It looks like a religious shirt. It's so holy. And so Bob Newton says to Bud Galloway, "We're going to sell clothes on Ronnie's show because it's the hottest show in town, and we're also going to teach Ronnie how to dress." But these were just a few of the experiences that I had at Channel 4. I think back about so many wonderful, talented people I met there, all the way from, what a great guy, Doyle Glazier, Ronnie Kaye in the art department. This was before computers. They were living, walking, breathing computers that could do it and do it beautifully and do it quickly and have the artwork there, And Ronnie Kaye, we used to sit for hours in the coffee shop. And Imogene, remember her, the lady in the coffee shop that made all that wonderful food? We had our own little cafeteria there. You could go down and have lunch. And when I first went to WKY, had a really short haircut. I just had no idea what to look like, what to dress like, anything. And Ronnie Kaye said to me, I'll never forget what he said, something really wonderful to me in the coffee shop once. He said, "I got to tell you something." He said, "When you get older, you're really going to be ugly." I swear to you, Ronnie Kaye, one of the most beautiful people in the world. We were syndicated in 10 markets, and we were syndicated all out in the West and Texas. So those were the C.R. Anthony store stations that they had already advertised on. So they plugged us into all those stations in Amarillo and Lubbock and West Lacour, Harlingen, and then we went out to the West Coast through a company called AmbiArt. And we were syndicated out there in San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles. So the show was on some major markets. We were on independent stations at the time, which were not that big, but still they were watched and viewed and by a lot of people. But I don't know, you look back at that show and you start asking yourself why it was so successful. Well, I did allude to the fact that we really did work hard on the show. And it was a work of love because it was so much fun. But we also had so many talented people behind the cameras. There was a lighting guy there and a camera guy that worked there, Tom Carmichael. He could really make you look. He could make a bad person look great. He could light sets. We would bring in people like Harry Chapin, the guy that did WOLD, and and those great songs, and they would set a set. We would have dry ice and fog and lights, and we could send these to other markets. These people were so good, and these things were so good that people wanted the videos all over the country. And we did Otis Redding. Unfortunately, this was all being done early on 2-inch tape. And as I had been told, 2-inch tape was very expensive, and we didn't save it because they wanted to erase the tape and run a show again on that same tape again the following week. I recall the Temptations doing My Girl. I remember James Brown doing I Feel Good. It's a Man's World. Jerry Lee Lewis sitting at a piano in Studio C with all the kids around him, doing a whole lot of shaking going on. This is the soundtrack of our lives, the pioneers of rock and roll, you know, and here we are right in the middle of it. So, in Channel 4, of course, where else could I have been that it would have been a better break for me than to look back, as I do occasionally now, and see video from the 60s and 70s and say, you know what, that stuff holds up today. That stuff is, Aaron Britton, you know, I came here and everybody was saying, Aaron Britton. I thought, you know, is this a town or a city or a country or what? No, it's a guy in color television. He tweaks the cameras. He goes back in there and looks at this. And when he's through with it, NBC wants it. It's that good. I mean, that's the kind of people we had out there at Channel 4. I think of some of the other great names like Jerry Rogers. Jerry Rogers was a conscientious director who really cared, you know. And the fact that all these young guys who were directors and audio guys and stage managers, the fact that they were still relatively young, and the kids on the show were relatively young, and the girls were extremely good looking, it made it a little easier for these guys to come to work on a Saturday. It was not one of the things they really wanted to do on a Saturday, but when they found out what we were doing and what the show was looking like, you know, it made it a little easier. But Jerry, I don't know, we started that show with 2 cameras, and I recall once that I looked out and one of the cameras was tilted to the floor. And while the music was playing and the kids were dancing, I went up to Bob Rodkey and I said, Bob, I said, what's wrong? Do we have a camera problem? He said, you don't need but 1 camera for this show, man. You can see it all. Before the show was finished, in the 8 years we did the show, we went from 2 cameras to 3 cameras to a 4th camera elevated. And at one time we even had a spider camera, we called it, on a very low pedestal that we went around and shot in the lights. And then we got the starburst and all the technical things that really helped. And again, back to the art department, those sets were absolutely fantastic. So we felt like we were in the big time. It was a great learning curve and experience for me. It really was. And I think I'm blessed and very lucky to have worked for a company called Gaylord, and for the nice people and the very talented people that I worked for at Channel 4. I did actually asked to end the show in 1974. I just went up. I remember Nick Panis, sales manager up there at one time, he said, Ronnie, he said, you know, he said, thanks to you and Porter Wagner, he said, this station is making money on Saturdays. Saturdays is no longer a dog time that they just throw away and say nobody's going to be watching because they're all out at the races or something, you know. So the ratings were real good. He said, I said, but demographically, Nick, I said, how did that rating work? He said, well, as you would expect, he said, the biggest audience you have is teenagers. I said, well, what is the second biggest audience? He said, men over 50. I said, okay, I get it. But I don't know, think about where we were here. 1966 to 1974, flower power in California, and the clothing was going crazy, and all kind of innovation in music, and the cutting edge stuff, and guys coming in like the Guess Who with Burton Cummings from Canada to be on my show, and they would, from downtown, after their concerts, come out here and spend time with me because they wanted to promote that record. I remember going to the Civic Center and walking backstage into Ray Charles' dressing room and saying, Mr. Charles, I'm Ronnie Kaye with WKY Television. I have a show called The Scene, and I would really like to have you on the show. And he said, yeah? He said, when do you want me on? And I said, in the morning. I could pick you up at 9 o'clock. He said, be at the Holiday Inn at 9 and then we'll be ready. And I couldn't even sleep that night. I was so excited. You kidding me? Time magazine told me that no artist that ever had come after Ray Charles that was not affected one way or the other by this man's music. So we were getting the creme de la creme of all the recording artists. I got him in my car. His manager was sitting in the back seat. We're driving to Channel 4, and we're probably at Wilshire and the Broadway extension. And his manager leans up to me and says, what are we getting paid for this? And I said, we don't have a budget for this show. We're just, this is just, you know, to promote your record and everything. I'm trying to pull that promote your record thing. He said, well, we just turned down $5,000 to do the Ed Sullivan Show. And I said, sir, I'm so sorry. I said, and my heart sank. I said, I'll turn around and take you guys back to the hotel. He said, well, it's just that we're union and we have to be paid. And I said, I'll turn around and take you back to the hotel. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, give me $2 and we'll do the show. I pulled out two $1 bills and gave them to his manager, and Ray Charles did the show. Still got the video today. I saw it, as a matter of fact. This video is now owned by a company called Billboard Books. And I said, what are you going to do with all this video, all these great artists that we had on the scene? He said, we are going to use this video. We are a clearinghouse. When an artist passes away, when we want to promote a song on the television, we're going to use this video to do that promotion. I said, okay. So I sold him all that video. And within a month, Ray Charles passed away. And I was watching Entertainment Tonight, and I looked, and there was my video of Ray Charles. My career at Channel 4 and at WKY both will be the thing that stands out in my entire life if I live to be 100, as to being the most productive and also the biggest learning curve that I've ever had. And I attribute that to all the professional people that I worked around, from, can go back and say, from Danny Williams, especially to a guy by the name of Lee Allen Smith, who I endeared very early on, unbeknownst to me, because the very first promotion I ever did in radio, we were at the Plaza Theater, and Lee Allen Smith, we were just welcoming people into the front door to our WKY movie, and little did I know, but this little small, short lady who looked to be about 85 years old came through, and I said, ma'am, come on into our movie, and here's some popcorn, and I'm going to show you to your seat. And I take her down to her seat. And the next day, Lee Allen Smith calls me in his office. He says, Ronnie, he said, and I'm brand new here and scared to death just to be in his office. I thought he's probably going to call me and say I'm finished. He says, remember that little lady that you were so nice to last night that you gave her popcorn, you took her down to the front, to her seat and everything? I said, yes, sir. He said, that was my mother. He said, welcome to WKY.